Good morning, everybody, or good morning, good evening, everybody. Seems like morning, but tonight we got a couple things to address. Tommy Abbott wants to start off addressing some situations due to the scheduling aspect, and then we're going to talk about some communication tips. So, Tommy, have at it.
Thanks, Tommy. Real quickly, guys, as we start to move into the next few weeks of assignments and games, Division II, Division III are starting to load some of their stuff up into the ZebraWeb system. The signers in those categories are getting games in left and right. There's going to be a lot of confusion and things that you'll need to check. So make sure that you, as a head referee, contact your crew ahead of time. Make sure that the communication is good. Contact the host institution. Find out all the particulars that you need to be ready for. Do that several days in advance, regardless of what game you have or what level. It's important that you get the information correct. We've seen a lot of game times change quickly once they're posted or released, and we've seen a lot of stuff happen quickly. We had 2 or 3 games today in Division I that were postponed or moved. So just make sure that you communicate properly with the host institution, and take care of whatever's necessary that you need to do to get through that game properly and have your crew ready. So with that, I'm just going to turn this back over to Tom and let him fire up his presentation.
All right, thanks, Tommy. I don't need to turn my camera on. You guys have seen enough of me already, but we're going to talk a little bit about keys to better communication. You know, we typically struggle at times with this, and what we're going to give you tonight isn't going to actually solve all the problems in the world about communication, but hopefully you'll take a couple tips away and we'll do a little bit better job with it. You've heard throughout the presentations this year how important communication is. A lot of that was revolved around partner communication, the presentations we've had so far. I'm sure next week Jody Tyser is going to touch on pre-game, and I'm sure communication is going to be part of that pre-game. So as you can see how important communication is, since everybody that did a presentation basically touched on it. You know, it's essential for success. There's no way you can be successful, advance to the top level without some form of good communication skills. It just doesn't happen. A lot of times, if you can't work through the conflict, can't work through the situations, you know, you'll end up making mistakes, etc., or you'll be just labeled where you just can't get the job done, unfortunately. So communication is key. As I mentioned, we won't be discussing partner communication tonight, but I know some of the tips apply to partners also that I'm going to cover tonight, as well as the coaches. So we'll get right into it. Basically, point A is on the first bullet point, and you know, point B is the bottom bullet point. Yeah. The purpose of effective communication is to reach consensus and build harmony. So that's the objective. But what do we want to get to? We want to get to a place that when the person you're talking to listens, absorbs your point and understands it. Very difficult to do sometimes. A lot of us aren't professional communicators. A lot of us are a little introverted in the personality. That's just what we live with. You know, there's a lot of things to overcome to be a good communicator, but there isn't a substitute to it. You know, as you can see on the slide, you know, communication is key to achieve successful outcomes from disagreements. And that's what we're going to talk about a lot tonight. You know, how to defuse, how to work around situations. A couple good things about this slide. You know, the first, I'll just start with the 41 that I used to work with a lot. He was kind of half deaf, so it helped him in the situations where coaches were yelling at him because he couldn't quite understand him or hear him. So that's a good advantage. The other thing on this slide is what a bad experiment with the socks. This was somewhere we're figuring around 2008 or 2009. Thank goodness that look didn't stick. So two good things on this slide for sure. You know, if you gotta, you know, if you look at the picture and you've been in them situations, we all been in them situations, right? Anybody's referee's been in the situation, such as in the picture. But you know, not to worry, all's not lost. If you don't have good communication skills, you aren't born with them. Basically, you know, it is an art form. You can study and they can be learned, which is key. I mean, how much time do you spend on communication? Probably not enough, right? We're worried about rules and mechanics. But if we learn to communicate and to communicate effectively, it should make our game go a lot smoother. And that's what we really need to put some time in. I bet a majority of people on this phone never thought about really studying the art of communication. I'm not a professor at it by no means, but you know, it needs to be part of your pregame. And you really need to understand as a referee where you need to take over the communication for that either situation or the game. It could be either, right? So you need to recognize when the communication is breaking down, you need to step in. Walt kind of talked about that last week, you know, what it takes to be an R. And communication was definitely in his presentation. A lot of information on the internet, guys. You can go out there, you can find communication stuff, you can find videos on it, etc. So there's a lot of information now how you can improve to be a better communicator. That's for sure. You know, there is a lot of challenges for us to get to the end result, as I mentioned a couple slides ago. You know, one of the biggest challenges in our game is our dynamic play. We really don't have time to communicate in the method we need to communicate at times. There's just, you know, there's not a timeout. Play is continuing. You're running up by the coach. You know, you may be able to stop for a second or two, but we still have to referee the game, which is a disadvantage for us. So you need to make the most of those few seconds you have, and you know, do your best is what we can say. Real simple dictionary definition. I didn't really want to get into detail and the true definition of communication. The only thing I want you guys to pick up on here is it's very, very important to understand that communication is just not verbal. And as you see here, sounds, signs, behaviors all factor into that. And they do show your feelings, your thoughts. So it's very important to understand that communication just is not verbal. And as we go through the slide deck, you'll hopefully understand that better. So some of the biggest keys you find for communication isn't verbal at all. Isn't any of your talking skills. The number one trait of a good communicator is listening. The age-old rule of, you know, why do we have two ears and one mouth? We should be listening a lot more than we talk. And that's a good rule to put in your head, to put in your memory bank. When you're in a difficult communication situation, you know, listen. You have to understand the other person's point of view before you can even respond to it. So, you know, as you're entering those communication situations where it may be controversial, it may be confrontational, we typically, the first signal we give is a nonverbal communication. It's how we walk, it's how we look, it's, you know, the frown, it's the eye raise, the eyebrow raise, etc. That tells a lot about a person's thought process, talks a lot about what that person is going to do. As you're approaching that situation where you're going to have that discussion, you need to understand, you need to be body neutral. All right. So it's tough. It is very tough. I will tell you that. So when you're in a conversation with somebody, asking questions, you need to make sure, you're going back to listening, you need to make sure you understand what the point of view that the person you're communicating with is trying to get across. Very likely to be not explained very well to you, which leads a lot to miscommunication. I thought you were asking this, but you're actually asking this. We really need to understand. If you can ask questions, that's the best method to get the point out that somebody wants to get across to you. You gotta be careful when you're speaking, right? Communicate directly without misinterpreting or reacting emotionally, judgmentally, or defensively. People may think that they're a great communicator because they talk all the time. They use a lot of words, etc. In our case, less is more. All right. If you stick to the facts and only the facts, make it clear and concise, it's going to go a long way to making that coach, understand your point of view. All right. So again, just because you use a lot of words, you talk all the time, doesn't make you a great communicator. A lot of times it makes you say nothing, right? So just be aware of that. Humor in a difficult situation probably is a little dangerous, right? We're not comedians by profession. Well, some of us might be, but I'm certainly not. And not many people can pull it off. And it actually makes the situation worse a lot of the times when you're trying to stick humor into a conversation that's really not humorous. All right. So it makes you look like a smart ass, a smart aleck, whatever you want to call it. And it's probably not going to be a good outcome for that situation. I'm going to go back a little bit about nonverbal. I mentioned a little bit, probably most likely where trouble begins, right? The coach already has a preconceived notion of what your opinion is, as well as you have a notion of what his preconceived notion is, right, as you're approaching him. So just be careful with that. Again, body neutral. I just want to touch a little bit about the key to success in both personal and professional relationship lies in your ability to communicate as well. It's not the words that you use, but your nonverbal cues or body language that speak the loudest. And that's the truth. All right. What you do, how you say it, and how you present yourself does speak the loudest about what you're going to say in the near future. There's a lot of cues, the way you listen. Are you really paying attention, or are you just putting a wall up? The person that's talking to you really wants to know that you're listening. So don't put the wall up. Act like you're listening. Really listen, actually, better than acting like you're listening. So, you got to be truthful. Do not try to interject opinions, etc. Like I said, just tell the facts, be truthful, and that's going to go a long ways. In our body language, I will tell you, it's often done instinctively rather than consciously. We don't know we're doing it. It's probably a habit we've had for a long time. I'll tell you what, I've got a habit of snapping my head and giving the coach a stare, right? Probably not a good thing, but I delivered a message that way. Probably not a message they want or, would like to hear or see. But, that's things that we do naturally that we don't think about. Again, listen first. We really need to understand what they're saying. You have to pick and choose in a heated situation on what really that coach or player or anything is trying to get across to you. Understanding the emotions the speaker is trying to convey. That's huge. Again, listen first. One of our biggest downfalls, in my personal opinion, is to be a successful communicator, you got to have a plan. You got to have some forethought, especially, in a target audience that you don't regularly speak to, which is a coach from a team, right? You don't regularly speak to a coach. You speak to your wife, you speak to your kids, you speak to your coworkers. But to be effective, you really need to think about what you're going to say. You got to have a clear objective of the conversation. One biggest thing, I was always tried to be taught was listen before you speak. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. Before you open your mouth, make sure that you know why you're doing so. Again, facts, straightforward, and concise. That's what you need to do when you begin to talk. I always try to talk about a little bit in my pregame where I talk to the crew, and they kind of look at me with their eyes crossed, their eyes rolling. It doesn't matter. I still present this. When you blow your whistle and make a call, especially one that that's going to be controversial, have you thought of a response? I'll ask the guys in my crew. Do you think of a response every time you blow the whistle that you may be asked a question about? I would say 8 times out of 10, you don't even get asked. But you know what? You had an answer prepared. I think that goes a long ways. It only takes 2 or 3 seconds to think of that response. But you know what? That 2 or 3 seconds when you're over there having a discussion with a coach means a lot. Like I said, the game's moving fast, etc. You don't have that quality communication time. So if you prepare your statement, prepare your thoughts on what you just called, it will help that situation for sure. One of the biggest things that we all fall guilt to is, communicating while stressed. We don't do a very good job at it. You lose your thought process. You say things that you don't necessarily want to say. The biggest thing is you misread other people. Why? Because you really aren't listening. Your emotions are so high that your stress level is really blocking that communication of listening skills. So it also, if you're in a stressful situation, you can't manage the stress, it's going to lead to knee-jerk reactions, right? Knee-jerk communication, etc. That is probably going to dig you a deeper hole. And that's definitely not what we want. One of the biggest things about managing stress, we want to understand that emotions are contagious. How we act is probably what we're going to get back. All right. If I'm upset and I scream at a coach, what do you think that coach is going to do back to me? He's going to raise his voice. He's probably going to scream back at me. It only makes the situation worse. All right. So you need to control, you need to understand how to manage that stress at the moment. That's for sure. Another tip here, during the game, your communication with players, coaches, and crew is a key element to proper game management. Absolutely. We heard that a little bit from Walt. We heard it from PJ and Doug, even back as far as Mark's presentation. One thing I can say, with the use of communication, we can attempt to make it a good day, or one that you're going to get in the locker room and say, what the hell just happened? Or you're going to drive home, think of that situation all the way home, think about it that night when you're with your family, think about it the next day. If you've refed enough games, you understand exactly what I'm talking about. That situations where communication could help really play havoc on your memory and really the outcome of what you thought of the game. So keep that in mind. Learn from it too. If you're in that situation, you're thinking about that situation the next day or the 2 days after, you need to go back and think about what could I have done better to fix that, or what could I have done better to avoid it altogether. A couple other things, when do it, you need to know when to engage and disengage. All right. You don't have to engage every time a coach says something to you. The other thing we have a problem with is we don't know when to disengage. When is enough enough? Right? You've got two opposing point of views. It doesn't appear it's going to be settled either way. Sometimes you just got to let it go and move on. And that's the best advice I can give you. Some of those situations just don't get resolved, and you do have to move on. But you need to know when that situation, when that happens, what to do and how to get out of it. You need to make sure you know if it's a comment or a question, right? The more I ref, the more I understood a comment / statement doesn't require an answer, right? There's no question there. So why would we respond? Example, he's warding off. And if I turned and responded to that and said, no, he's not, what does that do? It's going to put that coach on, that coach is going to be defensive at first, but you also gave him the opportunity to go on the offense, right? He's going to say something back to you. So a comment, statement, think about it. Does it deserve an answer? Or do you want to just go, ref the game still? If you're not going to answer, make yourself busy, do a count of the field, as you're going by, making sure that he knows that you're refereeing. He'll understand you heard him, and maybe that's all he wanted to do. He didn't need a response from you. He just wanted to put a thought in your mind. And that's why a lot of times a comment, a statement, I don't respond to. If it's a question, and it's a legitimate question, I think most of those need to be answered or responded to. Not necessarily answered, but responded to, right? And it's okay if you don't have an answer right away. It could be something your partner did on the other side of the field. You may not have that answer, but if you tell a coach you're going to get back with them with an answer, make sure you follow up. Another important piece on that is if your partner made that call and you don't necessarily agree with the call, you're not going to sell them out. You've got to work through that situation. Coach, he's right there. I will ask him at the next opportunity, and get back to you what the call was. All right. Don't get in between that discussion. De-escalation. Big key word lately in the last year through America, right? But if you think about it, our job is a lot like a policing job. We do have authority. We do have power. But the last thing we want to do is try to use that authority and power. That should be our last result. We need to show, that we care. The biggest thing is going back to our emotions. We need to speak calmly. That's for sure. If we can rise above what's coming back at us, who looks better? We look very professional at that point. That's for sure. One thing is, there's a big difference between being confident and arrogant, right? Be confident, not arrogant. Big difference. Big difference in those two words. Another thing is, don't be the show. It's not about you. right? Don't be the show, blend in. You want to be the show, attract attention to yourself, whether it's how you react on the field, it's how you communicate. You don't really want to be the show, that's for sure. Again, keep your emotions in check. One of the best examples I can think of, and I don't watch a whole lot of hockey, but I do watch enough with a pro hockey team here in the hometown. But watch the hockey officials. I tell you what, when they communicate, they do it very calmly. You don't ever see them get riled up, and their emotion is almost nothing, right? They'll skate up to the bench. The coach will make their point. They'll skate away. During their penalty relays, very consistent, low key, great signals. So, we can learn a lot from officials from another sport. That's for sure. And I just think the hockey officials may be one of the best of doing just that. I'm sure there's rare cases, but I tell you what, every time I see them, consistent, low key, and they just do their job. So when does the communication start? Well, it starts well before the pregame, but you need to have that discussion about communications in pregame. One thing is, right? We all know coaches, some history, etc. We need to be careful we don't enter the field with a preconceived notion. All right. You can discuss it and be ready for that type of communication that's going to come at you. But don't go on there and say, this guy's going to be an ass from the start of the whistle to the end of the whistle. You don't know that. He may have been in the past or may historically been, but just discuss it and be ready to handle it. Be polite and professional. Again, the word professional comes in here a lot. But if you're polite, it's going to go a long ways. They won't be at times. Some of them are, some of them aren't, right? But we need to be polite even if they aren't. We talked a little bit about it earlier. Be concise and brief. Speak facts and truths. Don't elaborate. Don't elaborate. One big key there. All right. Facts and truths, and be done with the conversation. Maintain an even voice. Don't raise it. Don't lower it. If you want to be monologue, that's when you need to be monologue in that situation. You also got to realize that, every call we make, 50% aren't going to agree, or, they're going to disagree, whatever you want to say. So we're always in a situation where somebody's going to be disagreeing with us. So be prepared for that. You also got to think about, do we deserve some of that criticism? Could be. We're not perfect. I've never refereed a perfect game. I know coaches haven't coached a perfect game, and players haven't played a perfect game. Players don't drop passes. Sometimes we fumble a call, right? You got to be prepared. If we did something wrong, you got to be prepared to take that criticism. And it's critical on what you do with that, when after the fact. So be prepared for that. If we deserve it, you got to be, you got to take a little bit more than normal, maybe. So there's a lot of ways we can avoid opportunities to invite conflict. Do we have to go over near the benches? Can we stay 10 yards on the field when it may happen? During timeouts, why do we wander over by the benches? There's no need to be over there. That only invites an opportunity for conflict most of the time. So remember those situations. You just came off a heated call and the team took a timeout. There's no need to go over there, right? Stay at the center of the field, do your stick checks or whatever you ever have to do. But don't invite conflict. We already talked about be cordial a little bit, but not too friendly. All right, you're a professional. Once you start being friendly, there's an opportunity that perception sneaks in, and there might be somebody watching that. Could be a coach scouting for the next game, seeing your behavior to a certain individual, certain coach. That's picked up on. We're watched from the time we leave the locker room until the time we go to the locker room. That I can guarantee you. We're watched a lot of the time by fans, players, coaches. So remember that. Again, the nonverbal communication comes into that because they can't hear what we're saying, but they can actually tell what we're saying if your body language tells you that. You need to show respect. Why not use please and thank you? I'm sure you use it at home, right? Use it in a workplace, I hope. So show the respect. Use please and thank you. It doesn't hurt. The biggest thing here is you need to move the conversation forward and don't revisit it. That's one thing that we all should work to strive to do is don't revisit it. Don't let a coach come back to something that happened in the first quarter. All right, simple, coach, that's over with. We're moving on. A lot of times they'll want to continue the conversation. You need to move the conversation forward. You need to bring it to a conclusion. Again, know when to disengage, right? One of the other big factors, not all about you. All right, don't make it about you. That's one thing, and a big thing. There's one book I would suggest everybody, have a chance. If you have a chance to read it, it's very good. The name is Verbal Judo, and it has to deal with law enforcement personnel and how they handle situations, difficult situations, all through communication to de-escalate it, change the reaction of the person delivering the message. It is pretty good. There's a lot of good tips in there on how to work yourself out of a difficult situation, strictly with the communication. So I would suggest, anybody getting that book and taking a look at it for sure. We talked a little bit about perception. And I tell you what, attitude and demeanor, right off the top of the chart. They'll have you figured out. Are you approachable? You standoffish? The coaches probably study a lot of, characteristics of people, especially with their players. And believe me, they're studying each and every one of us. They know our traits. They know if they can push your button. They know when they can't push your button or whose button not to push. They know that. So your attitude and demeanor mean a lot. We want to be approachable. You don't want to be too standoffish. But there is a line there that you need to establish on what your characteristic is. Biggest thing is be above it all. If anyone will look bad, it won't be you. If you're there in a professional mode and a coach is livid, screaming, carrying on, and your temperament is even keel, you're not raising your voice, you're not looking down, you're still keeping the eye contact with the person that you are talking to, who's going to look good? It's going to be you if you can handle that situation. And that's all comes down to keeping your composure. If you can keep your composure, there's a good possibility that the coach knows that, hey, you're in control. You're in control of the situation. You're controlling the communication at this point. And it may bring him back down as well. So confrontational communication, if you can keep your composure, stay calm, cool, and collective, it'll probably help the coach do the same. Again, don't show anger. And the biggest thing here is it's not about who is right, but what is right. We may be dead wrong as officials, and people need to understand that we're not perfect, and I think coaches understand that. But if we're arguing or communicating that we're right and we're dead wrong, you're probably going to be dead right, so to speak, right? You're not going to make it out of that situation. So again, it's not about who is right, but what is right. Keep that in mind when you're communicating that. Biggest thing, can it be solved? And we need to move on. A couple communication protocols that we need to establish with the coach. We need to give them time when appropriate. Right? Again, we got to ref a game. If we got an opportunity to talk to them, we'll go talk to them. Make sure you give them that time when it's appropriate. No assistance input on negative communication. I should have put in here. I don't mind if the assistant coach asks me a question, but by no means is he going to be derogative or having input into a negative conversation. It's not going to happen, right? You communicate with the head coach. You need to be able to answer questions. That's what we're there for. All right. A lot of them don't really understand the situation we called, and we need to make sure they understand it. I've used this a couple times. You talk to me, I'll talk to you. All right. When he's screaming and carrying on out of his mind, I might not talk to him, and I'll say, Coach, when you can talk to me, I'll talk to you. At that voice and that demeanor is how I would say that too. You got to ask yourself, can you have the conversation with your back to the coach? Sometimes in a heated discussion, turning face to face just makes it more confrontational. All right. Again, we still have to ref a game. That communication, it's not disrespectful. All right. You can have that communication, and you can communicate with the coach very easily without ever turning to him. All right. You can slide over by him, pretend you're reffing the game still, not pretend. I hope you're out reffing the game, and make that communication happen. We need to understand if it's a misunderstanding, and a simple explanation probably can fix that situation. Again, it's part of listening, understanding what the person you're communicating with is trying to portray to you. So most of the time it's a misunderstanding. Have a short memory. Coach screams and yells, hey, we got to forget about it. We got to refocus and don't hold grudges. That's exactly what we ask from a coach, right? So why shouldn't, we do the same? When things get bad and there's no resolution, everybody needs to understand where the line is, right? It's where you draw it. Where you draw it, you live with it. I had, some people have a tendency to draw that line in the sand pretty close. Some have a tendency to draw the line in the sand way too far, in my personal opinion. But if they cross it, you need to deal with it. Just as Tommy said in the NCAA meeting. Tommy, you got a comment on that, do you?
Yeah, briefly, Tom, I do. They put the points of emphasis in the front of the rule book for a reason. So if we go in and look at our rule book this year, you're going to see 6 bullet points under sportsmanship, team conduct, decorum, and pregame and postgame. And it's based upon what the committee feels is important for our sport. It's all about what Tom just said, and it's in the rule book for the express purpose because they want everyone involved in our sport, coaches, players, and officials, to know that the committee feels this is an important item. So they're asking all of us to do the right thing. Coaches come on the field to complain about something, and they're doing exactly that. We need to draw a line. And we have the tools to do that. If they come on the field to ask a question in a polite manner, we have the tools to do that. So I want everybody to think about that when that situation arises, because it will. In almost every game it does. Figure out where your line of sand is and make sure that they don't cross it.
All right. Thanks, Tommy. So just to wrap up, and I apologize for going as long as I did. My intention was to get it down to 30 minutes, but I think there were some key points in here we really need to talk about. So why is it important to maximize communication? Again, it limits the time spent away from the officiating the game. That's a job we have to do. It helps us refocus. Perhaps one of the most important things and neglected, and most neglected, is the other coach, right? There's two coaches that are participating in a game that day. If one-sided conversations are taking place often, what does that one not, the one not complaining think about? Automatically, he's going to go, is he getting advantage by acting the way he is? Is he getting all the attention? Is he consuming the official's time, right? Looks like possibly getting calls his way. Even if they're not, he could perceive it that way. So ultimately, in the end, hell, I might as well act like that, right? Maybe I'll come on that end of the stick. We got to take care of the people that are following the rules, and the ones that aren't, as Tommy said, if they cross the line, you need to take care of it. So we don't have two people not paying attention to the rules. So you don't believe it or think it's untrue? I'm going to tell you a little story, real quick story from a game report. It's paraphrased, all right, short and paraphrased. This is a coach's wording, not exact, all right. Again, it's paraphrased. So I was watching the behavior of the opposing coaching staff. He was out of control, in my opinion, and he irritated the officials for a large part of the first three quarters. It appeared to me that many 50-50 calls were favoring them. At the end of the third quarter, I decided I must change my approach and ride the officiating team. Well, it seemed to work, as penalties in the fourth quarter were 4-0 in my favor. We can't allow that thought process, right? You've got to have equal time. You've got to take care of issues when coaches are out of control, because that's exactly what you're going to get, the good guy going bad. And that's not what we need. We got a lot of good guys in this game. We got, that deserve equal share. And just be cognizant of it. That's all I'm going to say about it. And we'll move on from there. So why should we care about better communication skills? It's not just about lacrosse, right? Communication is one of the most important skills to develop. It's beneficial not only in the workplace, but also virtually every area of your life. It's important to understand that communication is what builds bridges and connects people. And when you're able to get to your point across in an objective manner, others are more likely to open up, see your perspective, and negotiate with you. So, take that away, think about that, and really think about your communication style and what you may want to improve with your style to help you as an official in this game. Just in conclusion, as I tell my kids, do as I say, not as I do. Some can, and some can't. I may not have done it right 100% of the time. But you know what? I've learned from them experiences for sure. And that's all I ask you guys to do. Reflect on it, learn from it, and move on. That's all I got. Thanks. Have a good week. Hopefully everybody's doing well in their games. Division III, as Tommy says, is going to start soon, if it hasn't started already. And we'll all be busier than we have in the last 4 weeks. Have a good night, everybody. Thanks.